Thunder cracked across the Montana sky as Olivia Porter stared defiant into her father's face, the shadows dancing across the small cabin in the flickering lamplight. "I will not marry him, Father, not tomorrow, not ever," she declared, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. It was 1879, and at 20 years old, Olivia knew her own mind, even if the world expected her to obey without question. The rain pelted against the windows of their homestead as Jeremiah Porter's face twisted with rage, his weathered hands balling into fists at his sides. Outside, the darkness of the night enveloped their isolated ranch, miles from the nearest town of White Rock. "You will do as I say," Jeremiah roared, slamming his palm against the rough-hewn table. "Clayton Whitmore is the wealthiest rancher in the territory. This marriage will save us, save this land." Olivia's mother had died 3 winters ago, leaving her alone to face her father's increasingly desperate schemes. The drought had devastated their cattle, and debts had piled higher than the hay in their loft. But she couldn't sacrifice herself to a man 30 years her senior, a man known for burying 2 wives already. "I'd rather starve than be that man's property," Olivia replied, standing taller. Her honey-blonde hair fell in waves down her back, loosened from its pins during their heated argument. Her father's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Clayton will be here tomorrow at noon with the preacher. You will be ready, or by God, You'll what?" Olivia challenged, stepping forward. "Force me to the altar. Even the preacher wouldn't allow such a thing." The slap came swift and unexpected, stinging her cheek and sending her stumbling backward against the wooden chair. Shock silenced her as she touched her burning skin. "You ungrateful child," Jeremiah hissed, his voice low and menacing. "After everything I've sacrificed to keep this land, to keep a roof over your head, your mother would be ashamed." The mention of her mother sent a painful jolt through Olivia's heart. "Mother would never ask me to sell myself," she whispered. Jeremiah grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh as he dragged her toward the door. The rain soaked them instantly as he pulled her across the muddy yard toward the barn, her boots slipping in the muck. "Father, please," she cried, the cold rain mingling with her tears. "You'll stay in the barn until morning," he growled, throwing open the heavy wooden door and shoving her inside. "Perhaps a night with the livestock will help you appreciate the comforts Clayton can provide." The lantern he carried cast grotesque shadows on the barn walls, illuminating the frightened eyes of their horses and the few remaining cattle they hadn't been forced to sell. The sweet smell of hay and the more pungent odor of animals filled her nostrils as he pushed her toward the empty stall in the back. "I won't do it," Olivia insisted, even as fear crept up her spine. She had never seen her father like this. Jeremiah's face was a mask of cold determination. "You have until dawn to come to your senses. Clayton arrives at noon." He stepped back, closing the stall gate and securing it with rope. "If you try to leave this barn before morning, I'll drag you back by your hair if need be." Olivia watched in disbelief as her father retreated, taking the lantern with him. The heavy barn door slammed shut, and she heard the unmistakable sound of the crossbar being slid into place, locking her inside. Darkness enveloped her, broken only by thin shafts of moonlight filtering through the cracks in the wooden walls. The rain hammered against the roof, creating a deafening cacophony that matched her racing heart. She sank onto a pile of hay, wrapping her arms around herself as her sodden dress clung uncomfortably to her skin. The reality of her situation crashed down upon her. By this time tomorrow, she would either be married to Clayton Whitmore or— what? Where could she go? What could she do? The night stretched endlessly as Olivia huddled in the hay, her mind racing through every possible escape. The ranch was isolated, the nearest neighbor miles away. Even if she managed to break out of the barn, where would she go in the darkness? In the storm, hours passed. The rain eventually slowed to a gentle patter, and Olivia realized she must have dozed off when she jerked awake to the sound of movement outside the barn. Dawn's first pale light filtered through the cracks in the walls, painting thin lines of gold across the straw-covered floor. Her heart leapt to her throat. Had her father returned already? Was it time to face her fate? The barn door rattled, but the crossbar held firm. Then came a voice, not her father's gruff commands, but something altogether different. "Hello, is anyone in there?" Deep, unfamiliar, and undeniably young. Olivia scrambled to her feet, hope surging through her veins. "Yes, I'm locked in," she called out, rushing to the stall gate and fumbling with the rope securing it. "Stand back from the door, madam," the voice instructed. Olivia retreated to the back of the barn as a tremendous crash shook the building. Wood splintered and cracked as the barn door gave way, swinging violently on its hinges. Framed in the doorway, bathed in the golden glow of dawn, stood a man she had never seen before. Tall and broad-shouldered, his silhouette was unmistakably that of a cowboy, from the worn hat to the dusty boots. As he stepped inside, features came into focus. Strong jawline darkened with stubble, keen eyes scanning the barn until they found her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, approaching the stall with purposeful strides. "No," Olivia answered, finding her voice. "Just locked in." "Who are you?" He reached the stall, his capable hands making quick work of the rope. "Name's Patrick Sullivan. I was passing by when I heard sounds from the barn. Thought maybe an animal was trapped." His eyes, a striking shade of green, met hers. "Didn't expect to find a lady instead." The stall gate swung open and Olivia stepped out, suddenly conscious of her bedraggled appearance, her damp dress, tangled hair, and the hay clinging to her skirts. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I'm Olivia Porter." His gaze traveled briefly to the reddened mark on her cheek, and his expression hardened. "Someone put you in here. Was it the man I saw riding out earlier? Older fellow, heading toward town like the devil himself was on his tail." Olivia's stomach dropped. "My father, he's gone to town already." She glanced at the light outside. "But it's barely dawn." Patrick's brow furrowed. "Left about 20 minutes ago, didn't even notice me camping by the creek on your property." "Mind telling me why your own father would lock you in a barn, Miss Porter?" Olivia hesitated, but something in this stranger's steady gaze invited trust. "He intends to marry me off to Clayton Whitmore today, at noon." Recognition flashed across Patrick's face. "Clayton Whitmore, the cattle baron." He shook his head. "Man's got to be nearly 50. He's rich," Olivia said simply, "and my father's desperate. Our ranch is failing." Patrick glanced around the barn, noting the sparse livestock. "So I see." He turned his attention back to her. "And you're not inclined to be the solution to your father's financial problems, would you be?" she challenged. A smile tugged at his lips. "Can't say I would." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "What's your plan now, Miss Porter?" The question brought her up short. She hadn't thought beyond escaping the barn. I don't know. I can't be here when they return." "You need to leave," he agreed, his expression serious. "Whitmore's not known for taking rejection well, and if your father's willing to lock you up—" He didn't finish the thought. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, the magnitude of her situation sinking in. "I have nowhere to go." Patrick replaced his hat, decision made. "I'm heading to my brother's ranch near Silver Creek. It's 3 days' ride from here. You'd be welcome to come along." "My sister-in-law would be glad for the company." Hope mingled with caution in Olivia's chest. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." His eyes held her steadily. "I know enough to see you don't deserve to be traded like cattle. Besides, he added with a hint of a smile. "My mother raised me to help a lady in distress." Outside, the sun was rising higher, golden light spilling across the ranch yard. Time was running short. "I need to gather some things from the house," Olivia said, making her decision. Patrick nodded. "Be quick. I'll saddle a horse for you." Moving with newfound purpose, Olivia hurried to the house. Inside, she changed into a riding dress and sturdy boots, then packed a small bag with essentials, a change of clothes, her mother's locket, and the money she'd been saving from selling her embroidery in town. It wasn't much, but it was hers. As she moved through the rooms, memories threatened to overwhelm her, her mother teaching her to bake bread in the kitchen, reading by the fireplace on winter evenings. Her father's laugh before grief and debt had hardened him. But there was no time for sentiment. This house had become a prison, and she was choosing freedom. When she returned to the barn, Patrick had saddled her favorite mare, a chestnut named Penny. His own horse, a magnificent black gelding, was tethered nearby. "Ready?" he asked, securing her bag to the saddle. Olivia took one last look at the only home she'd ever known, then turned to face the horizon. "Yes." Patrick helped her mount, his hands respectfully steady at her waist. "We'll ride north, stay off the main trails. With luck, they won't know which way we've gone until we've got a good head start." As they rode away from the ranch, Olivia felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. She was leaving everything she knew, placing her trust in a stranger with kind eyes and strong hands. But for the first time in years, she was making her own choice. The morning sun warmed her face as they crested the hill that would take them out of sight of her home. Whatever lay ahead, Olivia Porter was riding toward it with her head held high, and she wasn't looking back. They rode hard through the morning, putting miles between themselves and the Porter ranch. Patrick set a brisk pace, occasionally glancing behind them, alert for any sign of pursuit. Olivia matched his rhythm, grateful for the years she'd spent on horseback since childhood. By midday, they had reached a dense stand of pines that offered shelter and a small stream for the horses. Patrick dismounted first, reaching up to help Olivia from her saddle. Her legs trembled slightly from the unaccustomed hours of riding. "You all right?" he asked, his hands lingering briefly at her waist to steady her. "Yes," Olivia assured him, though her muscles protested. "Just need to stretch my legs." Patrick nodded approvingly. "You ride well. Not everyone could keep that pace without complaint." "My mother taught me," Olivia said, leading Penny to the stream. "She said a woman should be able to ride as well as any man, maybe better, since we have more to prove." A smile tugged at Patrick's mouth. "Sounds like a wise woman." He unsaddled his gelding, whom he'd introduced as Thunder. "We'll rest here for an hour, give the horses a break. I've got some jerky and hardtack if you're hungry." Olivia accepted the simple fare gratefully. As they sat in the dappled shade, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. By now, her father would have returned to find the barn door broken and his daughter gone. Clayton Whitmore would be arriving soon, expecting a bride. "They'll come looking for me," she said quietly. Patrick nodded, his expression serious. "Likely so. Your father has powerful motivation to find you, and Whitmore's got men to spare for a search." He studied her face. Having second thoughts, Olivia straightened her shoulders. "No, I'd rather face the unknown than a lifetime with Clayton Whitmore." "Tell me about him," Patrick suggested. "Why is he so set on marrying you in particular?" Olivia's fingers twisted in her skirt. "He came to dinner 3 months ago to discuss buying some of our cattle. He kept looking at me all through the meal. The next day, he made my father an offer not for the cattle, but for me." She swallowed hard. "He said he needed a young wife to give him sons since his first 2 wives failed in that duty." Patrick's jaw tightened. Failed in that duty, he repeated, disgust evident in his tone. And then what? They just disappeared. The first died in childbirth, Olivia explained. The second from fever, they say, but there are rumors that he wasn't kind to them, Patrick finished for her. I've heard those rumors too, even as far as Silver Creek. They fell silent, the implications hanging heavy in the air. After a moment, Patrick spoke again, his voice gentler. You made the right choice, Olivia. No one should be forced into marriage, especially not to a man like that. The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Thank you for helping me, Patrick. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along. Just happened to be in the right place, he replied modestly. I was on my way back from delivering a message to Fort Benton for my brother. Olivia studied him with fresh interest. You work for your brother's ranch, Patrick nodded. For now. James inherited the family ranch when our pa died 5 years back. I work as his foreman, but I've been saving to buy my own spread someday. A shadow crossed his face. Though land's getting harder to come by with men like Whitmore buying up everything they can. Is that why you were camping rather than staying at a hotel in town? Olivia asked. A grin cracked his serious expression. Partly that, and partly because I prefer sleeping under the stars to some bedbug-infested room. The good Lord made a mighty fine roof with that sky. Olivia found herself smiling in return. There was something refreshingly honest about Patrick Sullivan, a quality that had become rare in her experience with men, who so often seemed to hide their true intentions. We should get moving, Patrick said, rising to his feet and offering her his hand. Still a lot of ground to cover before nightfall. They continued north, Patrick choosing less traveled paths that wound through hills and valleys. As they rode, he pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his journeys through the territory. Olivia found herself relaxing in his company, the weight of fear gradually lifting from her shoulders. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising rain. Patrick scanned the countryside with practiced eyes. There's an old line shack about 2 miles ahead, he said, pointing to a distant ridge. Used by cowboys during roundup season, should be empty this time of year. We can shelter there for the night. The thought of sharing such close quarters with a man she barely knew might have scandalized Olivia under normal circumstances, but these were hardly normal times. Besides, Patrick had shown nothing but respect since the moment they'd met. They reached the line shack just as the first heavy drops began to fall. It was a simple one-room structure, built of rough logs with a small stone fireplace. Patrick took care of the horses while Olivia examined the interior. A narrow cot stood against one wall, a table and chair the only other furniture. Dust covered everything, but it was dry and secure. Patrick entered, shaking water from his hat. Rain's coming down hard now. Good timing. He glanced around the cabin, his eyes lingering on the single cot. I'll sleep on the floor, you take the bed. That hardly seems fair, Olivia protested. It's your knowledge that got us here safely. It's not about fair, Miss Porter, he said, slipping back into formality. It's about what's proper. Olivia couldn't help but smile at his sudden concern for propriety, given their situation. I think we left proper behind when I ran away with a man I just met. Patrick's eyes widened momentarily before he caught her teasing tone. A smile tugged at his lips. All the more reason to maintain what standards we can. He busied himself building a fire while Olivia shook the dust from the thin blanket on the cot. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof and creating a strangely cozy atmosphere in the rustic shelter. Once the fire was crackling, Patrick produced more jerky and a tin of coffee from his saddlebags. Not exactly a feast, he apologized. It's wonderful, Olivia assured him, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. They sat near the fire, the small space gradually warming. As night fell, the rain continued its steady rhythm. In the firelight, Olivia studied Patrick's profile, the straight line of his nose, the determined set of his jaw, the way his eyes reflected the dancing flames. He was handsome in a rugged way, but it was his quiet confidence that drew her attention most. "Tell me about your family," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. Patrick leaned back against the wall. "Not much to tell. My pa came west after the war, settled in Montana Territory with my ma. Had four of us. James is the oldest, then me, my sister Mary, who's married to a shopkeeper in Helena, and young Thomas, who's still in school back east." "You all went east for schooling," he nodded. "Ma insisted, said just because we lived in the wilderness didn't mean we had to be wild ourselves." A fond smile softened his features. Pa humored her, though it nearly broke him financially. He believed in her vision for us. "They sound wonderful," Olivia said softly. "They were." Patrick's expression clouded. "Lost Ma to pneumonia 7 years ago. Pa followed 5 years later. His heart, the doctor said, but I think he just missed her too much to stay." "I'm sorry," Olivia offered, understanding that particular grief all too well. "I lost my mother 3 years ago, influenza." Patrick nodded, acknowledging their shared loss. "And your pa?" "He always been so." "Hard," Olivia suggested. "No, he was different when Mother was alive," laughed more. "After she died, he seemed to lose his way. The drought came, the cattle started dying, the debts piled up." She sighed. "By the time Clayton Whitmore made his offer, I think Father saw it as the only way out." "Doesn't excuse locking you in a barn," Patrick said firmly. "No," Olivia agreed. "It doesn't." They fell silent again, each lost in thoughts of family and the paths that had led them to this moment, strangers sharing shelter from the storm, bound together by an impulsive act of rescue. Eventually, Patrick cleared his throat. "We should get some rest. Dawn comes early, and we've got a long ride ahead tomorrow." He spread his bedroll on the floor near the fire, politely turning his back as Olivia arranged herself on the cot. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, listening to the rain and the occasional pop from the fire. "Patrick," she whispered after a moment. "Yes, thank you for everything." In the dim light, she saw him turn his head slightly. "Get some sleep, Olivia. Tomorrow's another day." As she drifted towards sleep, Olivia realized that for the first time since her mother died, she was looking forward to what tomorrow might bring. Dawn broke clear and cool after the night's rain. Olivia woke to find Patrick already up, tending to the horses outside. The small cabin felt different in the morning light, less like a hideaway and more like the first stop on a journey. She quickly arranged her hair and straightened her riding dress as best she could. When Patrick returned, he carried a couple of eggs and some wild onions. "Found a nest not far from here," he explained, setting about preparing a simple breakfast. "Not much, but better than jerky again." They ate in companionable silence, the enormity of what lay ahead hanging between them. After they'd finished and packed their few belongings, Patrick turned to her with a serious expression. "Today's riding will be harder. We'll be crossing open country for a while before we reach the foothills. If your father and Whitmore have organized a search, we'll be more visible." Olivia nodded, squaring her shoulders. "What should we do if we see riders?" "Depends on who they are," Patrick said, checking his revolver before holstering it. "Most folks mind their own business, but Whitmore's men are a different story. If we spot them, we'll have to make a run for the trees to the north." As they rode out, Olivia could feel a new tension in Patrick's posture. He scanned the horizon frequently, his right hand never straying far from his gun. The unease was contagious, and Olivia found herself starting at every distant movement. They had been riding for perhaps 3 hours when Patrick suddenly reined in, his body alert. Olivia followed his gaze to a rise about half a mile distant, where several riders had appeared. "Could be anyone," she said hopefully. Patrick shook his head. "They've stopped. They're looking this way." He turned to her, decision made. "We ride. Now." They spurred their horses northward, abandoning the easy path for a direct route to the distant tree line. Behind them, shouts carried on the wind, followed by the thunder of pursuing hoofbeats. "They've seen us," Olivia cried, her heart pounding as she urged Penny to greater speed. Patrick's face was grim. "Just keep riding, don't look back." The distance to the trees seemed impossible, stretching endlessly before them while their pursuers gained ground with every passing moment. Olivia could hear them now, the hoofbeats growing louder, occasional shouts carrying on the wind. When the first gunshot cracked across the plains, Olivia ducked instinctively, though the bullet went wide. "They're firing warning shots," Patrick called to her. "They don't want to hit you, just scare us into stopping." They reached the first scattered trees, weaving through them at dangerous speed. The forest grew denser, forcing them to slow somewhat but providing more cover from their pursuers. Patrick led them along a narrow game trail, branches whipping past as they rode. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as they penetrated deeper into the forest. After what seemed like an eternity, Patrick signaled a halt in a small clearing beside a swift-flowing stream. Both horses were lathered and breathing hard. Olivia's hands trembled as she dismounted, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. Patrick was immediately at her side, steadying her. "You all right?" she nodded, fighting to catch her breath. Who were they?" "Couldn't tell for certain," Patrick admitted, leading the horses to drink. "But that was a search party, no doubt about it. Might have been ranch hands from neighboring spreads. Your father could have offered a reward." The thought sent a chill through Olivia. How determined was her father to see this marriage through? She had never imagined he would go to such lengths. "What now?" she asked, trying to keep fear from her voice. Patrick studied the forest around them. "We stay off the open plains. It'll make for slower going, but we can't risk being spotted again." He glanced at her, concern evident in his eyes. "It's going to be a hard journey from here." "I'm not turning back," Olivia said firmly. A smile touched his lips. "Didn't think you would." He reached out, brushing a leaf from her hair with gentle fingers. "You're braver than you give yourself credit for, Olivia Porter." The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her chest, momentarily banishing her fear. For a heartbeat, they stood close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could feel the solid reassurance of his presence. Then Patrick stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should keep moving. Still have daylight to use." They continued through the forest, traveling more slowly but making steady progress northward. Patrick seemed to know the land well, finding paths where Olivia saw only wilderness. By late afternoon, they had left the dense forest behind, emerging into rolling foothills dotted with pine groves. "We're making good time," Patrick told her as they paused to rest the horses. "There's a small settlement about 10 miles ahead, Little Bend. Not much more than a trading post and a few cabins, but there's an old trapper there named Ezekiel who's a friend. We can spend the night, get supplies." "Is it safe?" Olivia asked. "Word might have spread about me." Patrick considered this. "It's off the main trails. Folks there keep to themselves mostly, but you're right to be cautious." He studied her a moment. "We could say you're my wife traveling to visit family, might prevent questions." The suggestion brought unexpected color to Olivia's cheeks. "Your wife?" Patrick's own face reddened slightly. "Just for appearances, of course. Mrs. Sullivan for a night." Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the strange fluttering in her stomach at the thought. "If you think it's best." They reached Little Bend as dusk was settling, the handful of rough buildings nestled in a small valley. Smoke curled from chimneys, and lanterns glowed in windows, creating an unexpectedly welcoming sight after their tense day of travel. Patrick led them to a cabin set slightly apart from the others. An elderly man with a long white beard was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. He squinted at their approach, then broke into a wide grin. "If it ain't young Sullivan," he called, setting aside his project. "What brings you to these parts?" "Evening, Ezekiel," Patrick greeted him, dismounting and helping Olivia from her horse. "Traveling north with my wife. Hoping you might have room for us tonight." Ezekiel's sharp eyes took in Olivia, lingering on her face. For a terrible moment she feared he would recognize her, but then he nodded. "Any friend of Pat's is welcome here, and his missus too, of course." The old trapper showed them to a small room at the back of his cabin, furnished simply with a bed and a washstand. "Not fancy, but it's clean," he said proudly. "I'll get some stew heating." When they were alone, Patrick immediately began making a pallet on the floor. "I'll sleep down here," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Patrick," Olivia said gently, "Ezekiel thinks we're married. Won't he find it strange if you sleep on the floor?" He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll wait until he's asleep. He turns in early." Over a simple but hearty meal of venison stew, they maintained their pretense, Patrick occasionally touching Olivia's hand or addressing her as "my dear" with careful casualness. Each small gesture sent an unexpected thrill through her, though she told herself it was merely the excitement of their deception. Ezekiel proved to be a fountain of local knowledge, updating Patrick on conditions ahead and which routes were safest. He made no mention of any search parties or strangers asking questions, which relieved them both. After dinner, true to Patrick's prediction, the old man retired early, leaving them alone by the fire. In the gentle lamplight, Olivia studied Patrick's face as he studied a rough map Ezekiel had drawn for them. "We can reach Silver Creek in 2 more days if the weather holds," he told her. "James's ranch is about 5 miles outside town." "And you're certain your brother and his wife won't mind my arrival?" Olivia asked, the worry that had been building all day finally surfacing. Patrick looked up, his expression softening. "Sarah, that's James's wife, has been after him to find me a bride for years. She'll be delighted to have another woman around, even temporarily." The mention of a bride sent color flooding Olivia's cheeks again. She rose quickly, moving to the window to hide her reaction. Outside, stars sprinkled the vast Montana sky, reminding her how far she'd come from her father's ranch and how far she still had to go. "What happens after we reach your brother's ranch?" she asked quietly. Patrick joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "That depends on you. You could stay with them as long as you need, of course. Sarah would welcome the company." "And then what?" Olivia pressed. "I can't hide forever." "No," Patrick agreed. "But you're 20, you said. In another year you'll be of age even by territorial law. Your father's legal authority over you will end." A year seemed both impossibly long and surprisingly short. "And in the meantime, I have no money, no prospects." Patrick turned to face her, his expression serious. "You have time, Olivia. Time to decide your own future instead of having it decided for you. That's no small thing." His words warmed something deep inside her. He was right. Choice was a luxury she hadn't possessed until now, a gift his timely arrival had made possible. "Thank you," she said softly, meeting his gaze, "for giving me that chance." In the quiet of the cabin, with only the crackling fire and their lowered voices breaking the silence, something shifted between them. Patrick's eyes dropped briefly to her lips before he took a deliberate step backward. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Early start tomorrow." Despite his earlier concerns, Patrick eventually agreed to share the bed, though he lay as far to the edge as possible, still fully dressed save for his boots. Olivia did the same, acutely aware of his presence beside her, the careful space he maintained between them. Sleep came slowly, her mind filled with the events of the past 2 days and the uncertain future ahead. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a confused tangle of pursuit and escape, with Patrick's face appearing repeatedly as both rescuer and something more. She woke at first light to find his side of the bed empty. Voices from the main room told her Patrick was already up, speaking with Ezekiel. Quickly arranging her hair and straightening her clothes, she joined them. Ezekiel had prepared a breakfast of cornmeal mush and coffee, which they ate gratefully. As they prepared to leave, the old trapper pressed a package into Olivia's hands. "Some jerky and biscuits for the trail," he explained, "and a bit of sugar candy my niece sent. Thought you might enjoy the sweetness, young lady." The kindness of this stranger brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you, sir." Ezekiel waved away her thanks. "You take care of this one," he said, nodding toward Patrick. "He's a good man despite his stubborn streak." "I will," she promised, the words feeling strangely right on her lips. They departed Little Bend under clearing skies, their horses rested and their spirits lifted by the night's safety. Patrick had purchased additional supplies from Ezekiel, including a warmer blanket for Olivia and ammunition for his revolver. "No sign that anyone's looking for us here," he told her as they rode, "but we'll stay cautious all the same. Another day's ride and we'll be in territory I know like the back of my hand." The day passed peacefully, the landscape gradually changing as they traveled northward. The rolling hills gave way to more dramatic terrain, with rocky outcroppings and stands of pine breaking the horizon. They followed game trails and old Indian paths, avoiding the main roads where they might be spotted. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had begun gathering again, the air growing heavy with the promise of rain. Patrick studied the sky with concern. "Storm's coming, and it looks to be a bad one. We need to find shelter before it hits." They quickened their pace, Patrick leading them toward a line of bluffs in the distance. The wind picked up, bending the tall prairie grass in waves, and the first rumble of thunder sounded ominously. "There," Patrick pointed to a dark opening in the bluff face. "Cave. Used to shelter there sometimes when hunting in these parts." They reached it just as the skies opened, rain falling in blinding sheets. Inside, the cave proved deeper than it appeared from outside, extending perhaps 30 feet into the rock face. It was dry and, somewhat surprisingly, clean. "Doesn't look like anyone's used this place recently," Patrick observed, striking a match to light the small lantern he carried. The warm glow illuminated rough stone walls and a level floor. "We're lucky. Should be safe from the storm here." Olivia shivered, her riding dress damp from their final dash to shelter. Patrick noticed immediately, shrugging out of his coat and placing it around her shoulders. "Can't have you catching cold," he said gruffly. The coat enveloped her in warmth that smelled of leather, horse, and something uniquely Patrick, a clean, masculine scent that she found oddly comforting. "Thank you, but won't you be cold?" He smiled, the lantern light casting shadows across his features. "Takes more than a little damp to chill me. I've slept in snow on Roundup before." They set up a makeshift camp, spreading their bedrolls on opposite sides of the small fire Patrick built near the cave entrance. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning flashing across the darkened sky and thunder booming like distant cannon fire. As they shared the biscuits and jerky Ezekiel had provided, Olivia found herself watching Patrick more closely than before. There was a quietness to him that she hadn't initially appreciated, a thoughtful nature beneath his capable exterior. "Tell me more about your brother's ranch," she said, drawing her knees up to her chest and wrapping Patrick's coat more tightly around her shoulders. Patrick's face relaxed into a smile. "It's good land, about 5,000 acres, with plenty of water from Silver Creek, running about 800 head of cattle now with room to expand." Pride colored his voice. "James has built it into something our pa would be proud of." "And your sister-in-law, Sarah, you said?" He nodded. "Sarah's from back east originally, Philadelphia, came west as a schoolteacher and met James in town. She's educated, refined, but took to ranch life better than anyone expected." His smile widened. "Makes the best apple pie in 3 territories and can still quote Shakespeare while plucking a chicken." "She sounds wonderful," Olivia said, trying to picture this woman who had successfully bridged 2 worlds. "She is. You'll like her." Patrick paused, considering. "And she'll like you too." "She's been lonely for female company. The nearest neighbor woman is 20 miles away." Olivia wondered what it would be like, living so remotely. But hadn't her father's ranch been isolated too? The difference, she realized, was in the purpose. Her father's isolation had become a prison. Perhaps on the Sullivan Ranch it could be freedom instead. "What about you?" she asked, feeling suddenly bold. "No wife waiting somewhere?" Patrick looked momentarily startled by the direct question. "No, no wife." He poked at the small fire with a stick. "Came close once. Girl named Rebecca, daughter of a rancher near Helena. We courted for almost a year." "What happened?" Olivia asked when he didn't continue. He shrugged, a gesture that seemed designed to appear casual but didn't quite succeed. "She decided she preferred town life to the prospect of being a rancher's wife. Married a banker instead." His voice held no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance. "Can't blame her. It's a hard life for a woman." "Some women might prefer a meaningful challenge to an easy emptiness," Olivia said softly. Patrick looked up, meeting her gaze across the fire. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of shared values that ran deeper than their brief acquaintance would suggest. The moment was broken by a particularly loud crash of thunder that seemed to shake the very walls of the cave. Olivia jumped, a small cry escaping her lips. Patrick was on his feet instantly, moving to her side of the fire. "It's all right," he said, settling beside her. "Just the storm. We're safe here." His solid presence beside her calmed her racing heart. Outside, the storm continued its fury, but inside their rocky shelter, a different kind of tension was building, one that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the man whose shoulder now pressed warmly against hers. "Patrick," Olivia began, not entirely sure what she meant to say. He turned to her, their faces suddenly close in the flickering light. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. She realized with startling clarity. Instead, he reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice low. "Storm might last all night." He started to move away, but Olivia caught his hand. "Stay," she whispered. "Please, just until I fall asleep." Something like struggle crossed his features before he nodded. "All right." He settled beside her, his back against the cave wall, legs stretched out before him. Olivia hesitated only briefly before leaning against his side, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder as if it had been made for her. Patrick's arm came around her after a moment, holding her securely against him. The steady beat of his heart beneath her ear was more soothing than any lullaby, and despite the raging storm outside, Olivia soon drifted into the most peaceful sleep she'd known in years. She woke sometime in the night to find herself still cradled against Patrick's chest, his breathing deep and even in sleep. The fire had burned low, casting the cave in soft shadows. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving only the gentle patter of occasional raindrops. Carefully, so as not to wake him, Olivia shifted to look at his face. In sleep, the vigilant expression he maintained during their journey had smoothed away, revealing a younger, almost vulnerable countenance. His dark lashes rested against his cheeks and his lips were slightly parted. A surge of emotion tightened her chest. Gratitude, yes, but something more insistent as well. In the space of 2 days, this man had become more than a rescuer. He had become a companion, a protector, perhaps even a friend. And if her heart quickened when he smiled at her, if his touch sent warmth spreading through her veins, well, that was natural, wasn't it? Under the circumstances. Olivia closed her eyes, allowing herself to savor the security of his embrace for a few moments longer before carefully extricating herself and moving to her own bedroll. Patrick stirred but didn't wake, and she watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest until sleep claimed her once more. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Patrick was already awake when Olivia opened her eyes, packing their few belongings with efficient movements. "Sleep well?" he asked, a hint of something unreadable in his expression. "Very," she replied, wondering if he remembered holding her through the night or if he had been too deeply asleep to know. They broke their fast with the last of Ezekiel's biscuits and some dried fruit Patrick had purchased. As they prepared to leave the cave, Olivia paused at the entrance, taking in the vibrant landscape spread before them, grass glistening with raindrops, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze, and beyond, the distant peaks of mountains hazy on the horizon. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Patrick came to stand beside her, his gaze following hers. "This is what I love about this country," he said quietly. "No matter how harsh it gets, the winters, the droughts, the storms, there's always this waiting on the other side. Like God's promise that beauty follows suffering if you're patient enough to wait for it." The simple poetry of his words touched something deep within her. This man, she realized, saw the world as she did, not just as a place to be conquered or endured, but as something to be cherished and wondered at. "We should reach Silver Creek by nightfall tomorrow," Patrick said as they mounted their horses. "One more night on the trail, and then you'll have a proper roof over your head again." The day's riding proved easier than the previous one. The storm had passed north, leaving them under clear skies, and they made good time along the paths Patrick chose. By mid-afternoon, they had entered a region of rolling meadows interspersed with stands of aspen, their leaves shimmering silver green in the sunlight. "We'll camp there tonight," Patrick said, pointing to a small copse of trees near a meandering stream. "Good water, good shelter, and I might even catch us some fish for supper." The prospect of a meal other than jerky and biscuits was enticing. They made camp early, and Patrick fashioned a crude fishing line while Olivia gathered wood for a fire. There was an easy companionship to their actions now, as if they had been traveling together far longer than 2 days. Patrick's fishing proved successful, and they feasted on fresh trout cooked over the open fire. As twilight descended, they sat side by side on a fallen log, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. "Thank you," Olivia said suddenly. Patrick looked at her quizzically. "For the fish, it was nothing." She smiled, shaking her head. "For everything. For breaking down the barn door, for taking me with you, for—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "for treating me like a person, not a possession." His expression softened in the firelight. "You don't need to thank me for that, Olivia. It's what any decent man would do." "Is it?" she asked, thinking of her father, of Clayton Whitmore, of the men who had pursued them across the plains. "I'm not so sure." Patrick was silent for a moment, his gaze returning to the stars. "My pa used to say that a man reveals his true character not by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those who have less power than himself." He looked back at her, his eyes serious in the gathering darkness. "I've tried to live by that." "You've succeeded," Olivia told him simply. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth, a hunger, a question. He leaned toward her slightly, then caught himself and stood abruptly. "We should get some sleep," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Early start tomorrow." That night, they slept on opposite sides of the fire, but Olivia found herself watching Patrick's silhouette long after his breathing had evened out in sleep. Something was building between them, something neither had put into words, but which vibrated in the air like the tension before a storm breaks. Tomorrow, they would reach his brother's ranch. What then? Would this strange, intense connection they'd formed survive in the ordinary world of daily life? Or was it merely a product of their shared adventure, destined to fade once the danger passed? Olivia didn't know, but as she finally drifted towards sleep, she found herself hoping, perhaps foolishly, that whatever lay between them was only beginning. They broke camp at first light, both quiet as they prepared for the final leg of their journey. Patrick seemed more withdrawn than usual, his responses to her questions polite but brief. Olivia wondered if he regretted bringing her, now that they were so close to his brother's home. As the sun climbed higher, the landscape began to change, becoming more cultivated. They passed occasional fenced fields, and in the distance, cattle grazed on open rangeland. "We're on Sullivan land now," Patrick told her as they crested a hill around midday. He pointed to the valley below, where a substantial ranch house stood surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and bunkhouses. Smoke curled from the chimney, and figures moved about the yard, tiny at this distance. "It's larger than I expected," Olivia admitted, taking in the sprawling operation. Pride showed plainly on Patrick's face. "James has done well. Added the north section 2 years ago and built a new barn last summer." He glanced at her, ready to meet them. Nervousness fluttered in Olivia's stomach. "What have you told them about me? In your message, I mean." "Nothing," Patrick admitted. "I sent word ahead that I was returning, but there wasn't time to explain. This," he gestured between them. "We'll tell them the truth. James and Sarah will understand." They rode down into the valley, following a well-maintained trail that eventually widened into a proper road. As they approached the ranch house, a tall man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. His face broke into a broad smile of recognition. "Pat," he called, striding toward them. The family resemblance was unmistakable, the same strong jawline and build, though James Sullivan's hair was lighter and his frame slightly heavier than his younger brother's. Patrick dismounted, grinning as his brother engulfed him in a bear hug. "Good to see you, James." James stepped back, his gaze moving curiously to Olivia. "And who might this be?" Before Patrick could answer, the ranch house door opened and a woman hurried out. She was perhaps 30, with warm brown hair and a pretty, open face currently alight with pleasure. "Patrick Sullivan, you're late," she scolded affectionately, embracing him. "We expected you yesterday." Her gaze too found Olivia, still mounted on Penny. "Oh, you've brought company." Patrick helped Olivia dismount, his hands steady at her waist. "James, Sarah, this is Miss Olivia Porter. She's—" He hesitated, then simply said, "She needed my help." Something in his tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, for James and Sarah exchanged a quick glance before Sarah stepped forward, her smile welcoming. "Miss Porter, you're most welcome here," she said, taking Olivia's hands in her own. You must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside and rest while the men see to the horses." The ranch house was spacious and comfortable, with polished wooden floors and well-crafted furniture. Sarah led Olivia to a guest room on the second floor, where a large bed with a colorful quilt dominated the space. "You can wash up here," Sarah said, indicating a washstand with pitcher and basin. "I'll bring you some fresh water and something to eat. You must be famished after riding all morning." Left alone, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden transition from life on the trail to this ordered domestic world. The mattress felt impossibly soft after nights on bedrolls, and the clean white curtains at the window seemed almost decadently delicate. Sarah returned shortly with hot water, a tray of bread and cheese, and a sympathetic smile. "When you're ready, come downstairs. Patrick's explaining your situation to James now, but they'll want to know what you'd prefer to do next." Olivia washed her face and hands, combed her tangled hair, and straightened her travel-worn clothing as best she could. The simple food revived her spirits somewhat, though anxiety still twisted in her stomach. What if James Sullivan wasn't as understanding as his brother? What if they sent her away when she descended the stairs? She found Patrick and his brother in the sitting room, their conversation halting as she entered. James rose, his expression grave but not unkind. "Miss Porter," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair, "please join us." Olivia sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "Thank you for welcoming me into your home, Mr. Sullivan." "James, please," he corrected with a smile. "Patrick has told me about your situation. I want you to know that you're welcome to stay here as long as necessary." Relief washed through her. "That's very generous of you." James shook his head. "Not at all. No woman should be forced into marriage against her will. The law may not protect you adequately, but we can." Sarah joined them, carrying a tea tray. "We have plenty of room, and I've been desperate for female company," she said, her eyes twinkling. "The nearest neighbor woman is 20 miles away," Olivia finished with a smile, remembering Patrick's words. "So I've been told." Sarah laughed, pleased. "Exactly so. And while I love my husband and his cowboys dearly, there are times when a woman longs for another woman to talk to." The warmth of their welcome eased Olivia's fears. As they talked, she found herself relaxing into the comfortable domesticity of the Sullivan home. Sarah was as educated and eloquent as Patrick had described, but also practical and unpretentious. James had his brother's steadiness, tempered with a dry wit that frequently set them all laughing. Only Patrick seemed somewhat withdrawn, contributing to the conversation but avoiding Olivia's gaze. She wondered at the change in him, now that they had reached safety. After dinner that evening, a hearty meal that reminded Olivia how inadequate their trail rations had been, Sarah showed her to the ranch's small library, a cozy room lined with bookshelves. "Patrick mentioned you enjoy reading," Sarah said, indicating the well-stocked shelves. "Feel free to borrow anything that interests you." Olivia ran her fingers along the leather-bound spines, marveling at the unexpected treasure. "This is wonderful." "Did you bring all these books from Philadelphia?" Sarah nodded, pride evident in her expression. "Most of them. James thought I was mad hauling crates of books across the country, but I couldn't bear to leave them behind. Now he reads almost as much as I do." "It must have been difficult, adjusting to life here after growing up in a city," Olivia ventured. "Terribly difficult at first," Sarah admitted, settling into a worn armchair and inviting Olivia to take its mate. "I cried myself to sleep more nights than I care to remember during that first year. Everything was so vast, so wild, so different from what I knew." "What changed?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. Sarah's expression softened. "I did. Or rather, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed: strength, resilience, a love for this land that snuck up on me when I wasn't looking. She smiled. And of course, there was James. Loving him made loving his world easier. There was wisdom in Sarah's words that resonated with Olivia's own experiences these past few days. Hadn't she too discovered unexpected strength within herself? Hadn't the vast Montana landscape begun to speak to her in ways she hadn't anticipated? And Patrick? She quickly redirected her thoughts. You and James have built something beautiful here. We have, Sarah agreed, though it hasn't always been easy. Ranching is a precarious business, especially in this country. She studied Olivia thoughtfully. Patrick tells me your father's ranch has fallen on hard times. Olivia nodded, sadness touching her at the thought of what had once been a prosperous homestead. The drought hit us hard, and father didn't adjust quickly enough. He kept buying cattle when he should have been selling, took loans he couldn't repay, and saw marrying you to Clayton Whitmore as the solution, Sarah finished, her voice gentle. Yes. Olivia stared into the small fire crackling in the grate. I understand his desperation in a way, but I couldn't. Of course you couldn't, Sarah said firmly. No woman should be treated as currency, regardless of the circumstances. She leaned forward, touching Olivia's hand. You did the right thing, leaving as you did, and Patrick did the right thing bringing you here. He's been. Olivia searched for the right words. Kind, honorable. Something knowing glinted in Sarah's eyes. Yes, he is those things, among others. Before Olivia could respond, the door opened and Patrick himself appeared, looking somewhat uncomfortable to find them in private conversation. Sorry to interrupt, he said. James wanted me to tell you that Miller spotted some riders heading this way from the south. Probably nothing to worry about, but we're keeping watch. Sarah rose immediately. I'll make sure the guest room isn't visible from outside, just in case. She squeezed Olivia's shoulder reassuringly before leaving them alone. Patrick lingered by the door, his posture tense. It's probably just hands from the next ranch over, but we can't be too careful. You think it could be my father, or Whitmore's men? Olivia asked, fear returning at the thought. Patrick shook his head. Doubtful they'd track us this far, but James doesn't take chances when it comes to family. The word family caught Olivia by surprise. Was that how the Sullivans saw her now? Or was Patrick simply referring to himself and his brother? Thank you, she said quietly, for bringing me here. Your family is wonderful, Patrick nodded, still maintaining his distance. They are. You'll be safe here. A strange awkwardness hung between them, so different from the easy companionship they'd developed on the trail. Olivia wanted to ask him what had changed, why he seemed unable to meet her eyes now, but courage failed her. Well, he said after a moment. I should help James with the watch. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Patrick, she replied softly, watching as he turned and left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone in the library, Olivia tried to focus on selecting a book, but her thoughts remained tangled around the mystery of Patrick Sullivan's sudden distance. Had she misread their connection entirely? Had it meant nothing to him beyond the obligation of rescue? The thought brought an unexpected ache to her chest, one that had nothing to do with fear or exhaustion. The riders proved to be neighboring ranchers after all, stopping only briefly to discuss a stray bull before continuing on their way. Life at the Sullivan Ranch settled into a rhythm over the next few days. Olivia helped Sarah with household tasks, grateful to be useful after her days as a guest. She learned to make soap, to preserve vegetables from the garden, and to bake bread in the large kitchen range. Patrick was largely absent, spending his days with the ranch hands mending fences and tending cattle. When their paths did cross at mealtimes or in the evenings, he was unfailingly polite, but maintained a careful formality that confused and hurt Olivia more than she cared to admit. A week after their arrival, Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard when Sarah joined her, taking up sheets from the basket to pin on the line. "You've settled in well," Sarah observed. "I'm grateful for your help." "I'm grateful for a place to stay," Olivia replied. "I don't know what I would have done without." She stopped herself from saying his name. Sarah gave her a knowing look. "Without Patrick." Olivia busied herself with a pillowcase, avoiding Sarah's gaze. "Without all of you." "Hum." Sarah pinned a sheet to the line with deliberate precision. "You know, when James and I first met, he was terribly formal with me. Wouldn't even call me by my first name for weeks." Olivia glanced at her, surprised by the change in subject. "Really? You seem so perfectly matched now." "Oh, we are," Sarah agreed with a smile. But James was convinced that a city-bred schoolteacher could never be happy with a rancher. He kept his distance because he thought it was the right thing to do, that he was protecting me from making a choice I'd regret. Understanding dawned slowly. "And Patrick," Sarah nodded, "is very much his brother's brother in some ways." She reached for another sheet. "He believes he's doing the honorable thing, keeping his distance." "But why?" Olivia asked, the question that had troubled her for days finally spoken aloud. "What changed when we arrived here?" "Safety," Sarah said simply. "On the trail, you needed his protection. Here, you're secure. And Patrick, being Patrick, believes that means he should step back, let you find your own way without his influence." Olivia absorbed this, turning the idea over in her mind. "He thinks I feel obligated to him because he rescued me." "Something like that," Sarah confirmed. "Men can be remarkably dense about such matters, even intelligent men like the Sullivan brothers." Her eyes twinkled with affectionate exasperation. "It took me practically throwing myself at James before he realized I genuinely preferred his company to anyone else's." Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks at the implication. "I don't know if that is. We barely know each other." Sarah raised an eyebrow. 3 days and nights on the trail, facing danger together. That reveals more of a person's character than months of formal courtship. She finished with the last sheet and turned to face Olivia directly. "The question is, what do you feel for him?" It was a question Olivia had been avoiding even in the privacy of her own thoughts. What did she feel for Patrick Sullivan? Gratitude, certainly. Respect for his courage and integrity. Admiration for his quiet competence and unexpected gentleness. But there was more, a warmth that spread through her whenever he entered a room. A sense of rightness when they had ridden side by side. A lingering awareness of his touch that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with desire. "I think," Olivia began, then stopped, gathering her courage. "I think I could love him given the chance." Sarah's face broke into a radiant smile. "Then perhaps you should tell him so." "How?" Olivia asked, suddenly practical. "He avoids being alone with me." "I believe James mentioned that the north fence needs checking," Sarah said thoughtfully, "and that he was sending Patrick to do it this afternoon." She glanced at the sky. "In fact, he's probably heading out now. You might catch him at the stables if you hurry." Olivia hesitated only a moment before impulsively hugging Sarah. "Thank you." Sarah laughed, returning the embrace. "Don't thank me yet. Sullivan men can be remarkably stubborn when they think they're being noble." Heart pounding, Olivia made her way to the stables. She found Patrick just finishing saddling Thunder, his back to the door as she entered. "Patrick," he turned, surprise evident on his face. "Olivia, did you need something?" She stepped further into the stable, gathering her courage. "Yes, an explanation," his brow furrowed. "For what?" "For why you've been avoiding me since we arrived." She moved closer, watching as he tensed. "Did I do something wrong, say something to offend you?" "No," he said quickly. "Of course not." "Then why?" she pressed. "On the trail we were. Friends, at least. Now you can barely look at me." Patrick sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated." "Explain it to me," Olivia insisted, standing her ground. "I think I deserve that much." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "You're safe here. Free to make your own choices without pressure. I didn't want my feelings to influence those choices." "Your feelings," Olivia repeated softly. "And what are those exactly?" Patrick's eyes finally met hers, vulnerability plain in their green depths. "I think you know." She shook her head slowly. "I need to hear you say it," he exhaled heavily, as if surrendering in some internal battle. "I care for you, Olivia, more than I should given how short a time we've known each other. But there it is." Joy bloomed in her chest, but she kept her expression serious. "And you decided, without asking me, that the best response to these feelings was to avoid me entirely." Put so directly, his logic seemed suddenly flawed. Patrick shifted uncomfortably. "I thought you needed time, space to adjust to your new situation without feeling obligated to me." "Obligated," Olivia repeated, stepping closer still. "Is that what you think? That any feelings I might have for you would stem from obligation?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "Do you have feelings for me?" "Yes," she said simply, her heart pounding. "Not from gratitude or obligation, but from knowing you, seeing your courage, your kindness, your integrity. The way you look at a storm-washed morning and see God's promise in it." Patrick stood very still, absorbing her words. Then slowly, he closed the remaining distance between them, raising one hand to gently cup her cheek. "Olivia," he murmured, her name a question and answer both. "Yes," she whispered, tilting her face up to his. His lips met hers with tender hesitation at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. Olivia's hands found his shoulders, steadying herself as the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The kiss deepened, Patrick's arms encircling her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Patrick rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the cave," he admitted. Olivia smiled, happiness bubbling through her like spring water. "Why didn't you?" "Trying to be honorable," he said ruefully. "James would say I was being stubborn." "Sarah suggested as much," Olivia confessed. "She may have directed me here intentionally." Patrick laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I should have known. She's been giving me pointed looks all week." His expression grew more serious. "But Olivia, I meant what I said. You're free to choose your own path now. If that path doesn't include me," she silenced him with another kiss, brief but emphatic. "Patrick Sullivan, I choose you, if you'll have me." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. "I'll have you," he promised, his voice rough with emotion, "for as long as you'll have me in return." A discreet cough from the stable doorway interrupted them. They turned to find James standing there, his expression a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. "I see the north fence will have to wait," he observed dryly. Patrick didn't release Olivia, keeping one arm securely around her waist. "It seems so." James nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "Can't say I'm surprised. Sarah's been predicting this outcome since the day you arrived." He looked at Olivia. "Welcome to the family officially." As James departed, Patrick turned back to Olivia, his eyes serious despite his smile. "He's getting ahead of himself, perhaps. There's much we still need to discuss." "Yes," Olivia agreed, "but we have time for that discussion now. No one is chasing us and no barn doors need breaking down." Patrick laughed, drawing her close again. "When you put it that way, our courtship can only be less dramatic from here." "Courtship," Olivia repeated, liking the sound of it. "Is that what this is?" "If you'll allow it," Patrick said, suddenly formal. "I'd like to court you properly, Olivia Porter, with your permission." She pretended to consider, tapping one finger against her lips. "I suppose I could permit it, under certain conditions." "Name them," he challenged, his eyes alight with happiness. "First, no more avoiding me," she said firmly. "Second, you must kiss me at least once daily." "Harsh terms," Patrick murmured, leaning closer, "but I believe I can manage them." Their third kiss was interrupted by another cough, this time from Sarah, who stood in the doorway with her hands on her hips. "If you two are quite finished, dinner is nearly ready, and James still needs someone to check that north fence before nightfall." Patrick sighed, reluctantly releasing Olivia. "Duty calls. We'll continue this discussion later, count on it," Olivia promised, her heart lighter than it had been in years. As summer gave way to autumn on the Sullivan Ranch, Olivia found herself settling into a life she could never have imagined when she'd stood defiant before her father that stormy night. Sarah had become the sister she'd never had, teaching her the skills needed to manage a ranch household while valuing her companionship and opinions. James treated her with the same respect and affection he showed his own wife, including her in family discussions and teaching her about the business aspects of ranching. The Hands accepted her presence with good-natured curiosity that quickly turned to genuine regard when they discovered she could ride as well as most of them and wasn't afraid of hard work. And Patrick courted her with a deliberate tenderness that made her fall more deeply in love with each passing day. They rode together when his duties allowed, explored the furthest reaches of the Sullivan Ranch, and spent quiet evenings reading aloud from Sarah's library or simply talking by the fire. Their courtship was not without its challenges. Word eventually reached them that Clayton Whitmore was indeed searching for Olivia, having apparently convinced her father that he would make the marriage worth Jeremiah's financial sacrifice. James increased security on the ranch, and Patrick rarely let Olivia ride alone, despite her occasional frustration at the restriction. "It's not that I don't think you capable," he explained one afternoon as they rested their horses by Silver Creek. "It's that Whitmore has more men than we do, and I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you." Olivia understood his concern, even as she chafed against the limitations it imposed. "I just hate feeling like I'm hiding," she admitted. "Like I've done something wrong when I was only protecting my own future." Patrick took her hand, his expression serious. "You've done nothing wrong, but Whitmore is a powerful man in these parts, and your father may genuinely believe he has legal authority over you until you turn 21. It was a sobering reminder of her precarious position, one that wouldn't be fully resolved for months yet. But Olivia refused to let fear dominate her days, choosing instead to focus on building the life she wanted. As autumn deepened toward winter, she wrote to her mother's sister in St. Louis, explaining her situation in careful terms. The response came weeks later: sympathy, an open invitation to visit when circumstances allowed, and a family Bible that had belonged to Olivia's mother smuggled out of the Porter Ranch by a sympathetic ranch hand who had once courted Aunt Margaret. "She says Mother would have been proud of my courage," Olivia told Patrick, tears welling in her eyes as she traced the familiar handwriting in the Bible's family record. "That she never would have wanted me married against my will." Patrick's arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her close. "Your aunt sounds like a wise woman. I look forward to meeting her someday." The first snow fell in early November, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of white. Confined more often to the house by weather, Olivia and Sarah baked, sewed, and prepared for the coming Christmas celebrations. Patrick and James spent long hours ensuring the cattle had access to feed and unfrozen water, returning to the house with ruddy cheeks and frosted beards. On the evening of the first real blizzard, when wind howled around the eaves and snow piled high against the windows, Patrick found Olivia alone in the library. She had been reading by lamplight but set her book aside when he entered, smiling at the sight of him. "James said the cattle are all secure," he reported, settling beside her on the small sofa. "We shouldn't lose any in this storm." "That's wonderful news," Olivia said, leaning into his side. His arm came around her automatically, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. They sat in comfortable silence for a time, watching the fire dance in the grate. Then Patrick shifted slightly, reaching into his pocket. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "Something I've been carrying for a while, waiting for the right moment." Olivia's heart began to beat faster as he withdrew a small object and held it out to her. In his palm lay a ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," Patrick explained softly. "Pa gave it to her when they decided to come west together. James has her wedding ring, but Ma left this one specifically for whichever of her boys married for love rather than convenience." He smiled slightly at the memory. She was quite adamant about that distinction. Olivia stared at the ring, then at Patrick's face, hardly daring to hope. "Patrick." He took her hand in his expression earnest. "Olivia Porter, these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know we met under unusual circumstances, but I believe with all my heart that God meant for our paths to cross that morning." He drew a deep breath. "I love you. I want to build a life with you here or elsewhere if you prefer. Will you marry me?" Joy surged through Olivia, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Patrick, I love you too." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Patrick drew her close, sealing their engagement with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they shared their news with James and Sarah the next morning, the celebration was immediate and enthusiastic. Sarah hugged Olivia tightly, already planning the details of a spring wedding, while James clapped his brother on the shoulder, his pride evident. "You've chosen well, both of you," he said, raising his coffee cup in a toast. "To Patrick and Olivia, may your life together be blessed with love, laughter, and prosperity." As winter settled in fully, blanketing the ranch in deep snow, preparations for both Christmas and the wedding occupied much of their time. Letters went back and forth to Olivia's aunt, who promised to attend the ceremony despite the journey. Patrick began construction on a small cabin a mile from the main house, close enough for family support, but far enough for privacy. "It will be modest at first," he warned Olivia as they reviewed his plans one evening. "Nothing like what you grew up with." "It will be ours," she replied simply. "That makes it perfect." In February, unexpected news arrived via a traveling peddler who stopped at the ranch. Clayton Whitmore had married a banker's daughter from Helena, apparently giving up his search for Olivia. More surprising still was word that Jeremiah Porter had sold what remained of his ranch and headed to California, his whereabouts now unknown. The news brought Olivia a complex mixture of relief and sadness. "I never thought he'd leave Montana," she told Patrick as they walked through the snowy yard. "That land was everything to him." "Perhaps losing you made him realize what truly matters," Patrick suggested gently. "Some lessons come at great cost," Olivia nodded, leaning against his solid strength. "I hope he finds peace there." With the threat of pursuit removed, life at the Sullivan Ranch grew more relaxed. Olivia could ride freely again, often accompanying Patrick on his rounds of the property. Together they watched as winter reluctantly gave way to spring, the land awakening once more with new life. Their wedding took place on a perfect May morning, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows and aspen leaves shimmering in the gentle breeze. They exchanged vows beneath an arch James and the hands had constructed, decorated by Sarah and Olivia with spring blossoms. Neighbors from miles around attended, along with Olivia's Aunt Margaret, who had journeyed from St. Louis for the occasion. "You look so much like your mother," Margaret told Olivia, tears glistening in her eyes. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." Patrick stood tall and handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face as she walked toward him in a dress of ivory silk, Sarah's wedding gown, altered to fit her slender frame. When he took her hands in his, Olivia felt the rightness of their union down to her very soul. "I, Patrick, take you, Olivia, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. I, Olivia, take you, Patrick, to be my lawfully wedded husband," she responded, her heart full to overflowing. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Patrick's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of all the years to come. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing, food and laughter filling the Sullivan Ranch with joy. Later, as they rode together to their new cabin, now finished and furnished with gifts from friends and family, Olivia marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this," she told Patrick as they approached the small house that was to be their home. Lamplight glowed in the windows, welcoming them. Patrick dismounted and came to lift her down, holding her close for a moment before setting her on her feet. "Regrets?" he asked, searching her face in the moonlight. "Not a single one," Olivia assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Every step led me to you," he smiled, sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sullivan." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a bedroom with a large bed covered in one of Sarah's quilts, a small kitchen with new pots hanging from hooks. What it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in warmth and promise. "It's perfect," Olivia declared, turning to embrace her husband. "Absolutely perfect." In the years that followed, the small cabin expanded along with their family. Their first child, a son named Michael, arrived exactly a year after their wedding, a strong, healthy boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's determined spirit. 2 years later, Emma joined them, a tiny, dark-haired daughter who had all the hands wrapped around her finger before she could walk. The ranch prospered under the combined efforts of the Sullivan brothers, with Patrick eventually purchasing adjoining land to expand their holdings. On the 5th anniversary of the day Patrick had broken down the barn door, he and Olivia rode to a hilltop overlooking their land. Spring was in full bloom, painting the valley in vibrant greens and wildflower colors. Their children were spending the day with their aunt and uncle, giving the couple a rare day to themselves. "You ever think about how differently our lives might have gone?" Olivia asked as they spread a blanket on the grass. "If you hadn't camped by that creek that night, if you hadn't heard me in the barn." Patrick considered this, stretching out beside her on the blanket. "Sometimes. But then, I remember what my mother used to say about God's plan being revealed in unexpected moments." He took her hand, running his thumb over the pearl ring she still wore alongside her wedding band. "I was meant to find you that morning." Olivia smiled, leaning down to kiss him. "My heroic cowboy breaking down doors at dawn," he laughed, drawing her into his arms. I'd break down 1,000 doors to reach you. Olivia Sullivan. As they lay together beneath the vast Montana sky, Olivia thought of all the doors, literal and figurative, that had closed and opened in her life. The barn door that had imprisoned, and then, through its destruction, liberated her. The doors of opportunity that had appeared when she'd found the courage to choose her own path. The door to their cabin, through which they'd carried their newborn children, creating a family bound by love rather than obligation. "I love you," she whispered to her husband, gratitude filling her heart for the twist of fate that had brought this good, honorable man into her life on that fateful dawn. Patrick's arms tightened around her, his voice warm against her ear. "And I love you, always." In the valley below, their home awaited their return, and beyond it stretched a future they would build together, day by day, choice by choice, love by love. A future that had begun with a desperate prayer, a broken door, and the courage to ride toward the unknown horizon.